I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First in reply to the Prime Minister's statement to this House. The Prime Minister has not been frank with the New Zealand public. He has not told New Zealanders the truth, what is actually happening to this economy. Let's put aside all the spin and let's look at the reality. Right now, the sun is shining on the New Zealand economy, but these are good times for the dairy and agricultural industry. However, this has nothing to do with John Key's government. They are just the beneficiaries of record prices for dairy products. It was not of their doing. Yet despite this massive advantage, what is the reality? The reality is that we have 150,000 unemployed in this country. But on top of those 150,000 unemployed, we have a further 60,000 underemployed women, and we have a further 30,000 underemployed men. That's another 90,000 people in New Zealand who currently are not getting sufficient work to justify their daily existence. Under our unemployment statistics, if you work for more than 1 hour, you are deemed to have employment. Many people are struggling because they cannot get full employment, and therefore, as a result, their children, their families suffer. Particularly in this category, Mr Speaker, women are suffering, and Maori are suffering, and Pacifica people are suffering. We heard during the manufacturing inquiry, for instance, where Summit Wool in the South Island, many of the women who were working in that factory were laid off, but many of their husbands had work in the district. As a result, those women could not find alternate work, and they were not deemed to be unemployed. They simply had to go home. Their family incomes virtually halved, and as a result, many of those people from Summit Wool Spinners now are in hard times looking for alternate work. They don't appear on the statistics. 1 million New Zealanders live overseas, so further to the government statistics, there are many, many of those, particularly young graduates. And I know so many young graduates from the Auckland universities, from the North Shore universities, who simply have not been able to get work in this country and have had to go abroad to find work because it's not here. So the spin that this government puts on that everything's rosy, it is not. And ask young New Zealanders, particularly those under the age of about 28 or 30, who are really struggling to find jobs, graduates who have spent 3, 4, 5 years earning a degree and are now struggling to get good gainful employment to cover the ever-spiralling cost of housing, particularly in the likes of Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington. Ordinary Kiwis are still dealing daily with the pain of zero or minimal wage increases. The chief executives, the chief executives and top people are getting significant gains, but good ordinary New Zealanders are not necessarily seeing that. And so many of them are on minimum wage or very low wages, and they're not going up by any great steps at all. And meanwhile, New Zealand has ended up with $150 billion in total overseas debt, some $60 billion of that government debt. When the national government took over in 2008, government debt was at $6 billion. It's now at over $60 billion. That is not a record of success. That is adding to this country's debt, and now New Zealand has one of the highest debt per capita ratios in the world. Auckland, at the same time, is in the grip of speculative housing bubble because this national government will not address the situation that foreigners are coming in and buying houses, buying property, buying land, and are speculating on that growth in the Auckland demand for housing. As a result, good average Kiwis are finding it increasingly difficult to find housing that they can afford in the Auckland area. And it's happening. And it's happening all over Auckland. And you ask young Aucklanders, and Mr Speaker, any member should ask young Aucklanders, and I've got 3 in their 20s, how are they going to get into housing in the Auckland market? They will only get into housing because their parents assist them or their families assist them. How can they put a deposit of 20% down on a $700,000 property? It's impossible. It's impossible for young graduates coming out of university, and you know it, Dr. Coleman. Our economy is still dangerously. But New Zealand First will fix this. New Zealand First will fix this because when we When we are in government, we will ensure that speculative purchasing of houses and property in New Zealand by foreigners is stopped. It will be stopped under New Zealand First. And on top of this, we're seeing speculative trading of New Zealand's currency. The New Zealand Reserve Bank Act, which is some 26 years old, the Reserve Bank Act, and this government will not review it. This government will not review an act that was brought in before computers were even here, before cell phones were here, before fax machines were here. They will not review an act that at the present time constrains the Reserve Bank Governor to working within a tight inflation rate criteria, ignoring all the other factors that are driving the value of the Kiwi dollar up. And we're now at nearly 95 cents to the Australian dollar, one of our second major export markets, and New Zealand exporters to Australia are really finding it tough because this government won't step in and review the Reserve Bank Act. Well, New Zealand First will. We will ensure, and the Right Honourable Winston Peters has had a bill twice in this House in the last year, Members' Bill, which the government has knocked back, but we will review the Reserve Bank Act and we will give the Reserve Bank more means to address the situation and run the economy in a better way that does not drive the New Zealand dollar even more higher. The Prime Minister also did not mention about the state asset sales program. The program where instead of getting some $7 billion or thereabouts, which they sold to the public when they first put forward that program, ended up at much less than $5 billion. And where on an annual basis now, New Zealanders are losing close to $1 billion in dividends each year, every year, this year, next year and every year thereafter, a loss of nearly $1 billion in dividends from those state assets as a result of the national government selling our dams, selling our beautiful dams on the Waikato River, selling our beautiful dams in the South Island, selling our geothermal power stations and selling our iconic airline Air New Zealand down the river. Well, New Zealand First will also address that. We will buy back those power stations, those power companies, and we will merge them into one state entity for generating of power in this country. We will ensure that power is put under one state-owned enterprise, and we will get on top of that situation. We're also seeing, Mr. Speaker, through this, power prices escalating, where now residential consumers are paying in excess of 27 cents a unit, while commercial users are paying 15 cents a unit and industrial users are paying only some 10 cents per unit. Meanwhile, the government gives $30 million to Rio Tinto, while they will be paying even less than 10 cents per unit. Well, again, New Zealand First will sort that out by bringing those entities together, so it will bring down the wholesale price of electricity, and we will ensure the likes of Grandma in her cold house in the middle of winter will receive discounts from those state-owned enterprises and ensure that there is cheaper power for our seniors in the winter months. Mr. Speaker, we will give, New Zealand First will give support to the export sector, which this government is not doing. We will ensure there's far greater diversity in terms of away from agricultural products into a far stronger base for manufacture. We will also support and give meaningful support to our veterans. We'll give meaningful support, as we have always done, to those who have served this country. We will also give meaningful support to the health and system and social services, where, for instance, New Zealand First brought in under 6 medical checks for children. Again, we will ensure that those sorts of areas are extended and added to. We will also bring in a community wage where New Zealanders who are underemployed or unemployed will work for their local communities, will work for their local councils, will be encouraged to work in areas in their communities to receive money back from the government, so in turn providing assistance to their communities but being paid to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New Zealand First will be doing a lot more as well.
I call the Honourable Member Honourable Minister Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker.